further ado, I'm just going to give a nice warm welcome to our speaker for today, David Grosspietsch. He's an Associate Director for Clean Technology Investment at South Pole and a member of the management agency of the Swiss Technology Fund. South Pole is also one of our notable partners, so we're very grateful for that partnership and thank you. The Technology Fund provides loan guarantees up to about 3 million Swiss francs to Swiss startups and SMEs whose innovative products contribute to the mitigation of climate change. So hence a notable speaker for today's session for Sustainability is Better Business. But actually David, as a background, he's an industrial engineer by training and holds a PhD from ETH Zurich in the domain of sustainable technologies, which is in a sense decentralized energy systems and innovation management. He gained much practical experience during 2 years in a strategy consultancy company and as a senior researcher on sustainability topics at ETH Zurich. And during his university studies at Fraunhofer Institute, Bosch and Porsche. So he brings a lot to the table. We hope that you enjoy his session today. And I'm going to pass the baton over to David. And before I do that, may I ask everybody to keep their microphones on mute. If you want to remain on video, no problem. It's always nice to see the audience. And yeah, keep the questions going in the chat. Over to you, David.
Thank you very much, Suki, for your kind introduction. And while I'll get started in putting up the PowerPoint slides I have prepared, I hope you can see them now on screen. I can't hear you, Suki, but I see you talking. So okay,
we can see them fine.
Okay,
Ria, can you give us a thumbs up if you can see everything fine? Super. But just a note to all that this session is being recorded and we will be sharing it on our public channels afterwards. So just be mindful of that. And that's it from me. And over to you, David. All good.
All right. Thanks again, and warm welcome from my side as well. I'm happy to give you a quick introduction and present to you what the Swiss Technology Fund is, what we're doing, how we maybe can support your startup, your business in the cleantech space, and yeah, how we're approaching things and why I think sustainability is definitely better business. Yeah, so maybe short as an introduction, and Suki has mentioned that in the introductional phrase of the abstract. The Tech Fund has been put in place in 2014, is in operation since the beginning of 2015, and it's a financial instrument in the case of loan guarantees to startups and SMEs that help mitigating climate change. We can basically spend up to 3 million Swiss francs per company. And this is an instrument that is rooted in the CO2 Act, in the Swiss CO2 Act. So money from the CO2 Act is basically spent, on the one hand, is reimbursed to the Swiss citizens via AHV, but also a small part is invested into mitigating climate change with the building program and the Swiss Technology Fund. How is it working? This is basically the working principle. The company that would be you with your startup, with your innovative product. It's a co-financing instrument. So on the one hand, you would usually raise a finance round with a private investor with equity or loans, around 40%. That is then matched with money that is backed by the Swiss Technology Fund. The money itself comes from a accredited bank, and the interest fees are 0.9% to the tech fund and usually around roughly 1% for the bank. So in total, it's roughly 2% of interest for up to 3 million Swiss francs for loan guarantees for up to 10 years. And since it's rooted in the CO2 Act, it's basically it's an instrument that is that has been put in place by the Swiss Federal Office for the Environment, and that's why the cleantech nature of the companies and of their products is very important. but I'll come to that in a second. What are the advantages of the Swiss Technology Fund? On the one hand, we basically leverage your investments without dilute. You can leverage your investments without diluting the ownership. It's a co-financing instrument, as I said. It's a loan with attractive conditions, I would say, especially for startups in a very early stage. And you get your business plans validated by experts through a 3-stage process that I will talk about in a second as well. Basically, since it's part of the Swiss Federal Office for the Environment, we have 4 general clean tech domains that we are looking for that are not necessarily MECs or can be overlapping, but those are the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, the promotion of renewables, efficient utilization of electrical energy, and the conservation of natural resources. So your company or your product would need to fall into one of these categories. Knowing that they could be overlapping. Our qualification criteria, your company or your product needs to be climate friendly, and that's what we assess. You need to have some sort of degree of innovation with your company, with your product. You also have to display a competitive position, so it needs to be guaranteed that you have chances to scale at the market. You need to be already market ready, so it's a scaling instrument and not a invention instrument, so to say, but I'll also talk about that in a second. You need to display creditworthiness to us, so can't be over-indebted, for instance. A couple of other sub-criteria, of course. And then as a last criterion, you need to show some sort of value creation or substantial value creation needs to happen in Switzerland, since it's a Swiss instrument. All right. Maybe if you're unsure whether you qualify for these 6 criteria that I just mentioned, there's kind of a preliminary check on our homepage that I can recommend, also along with a short video. So this is our homepage, technologyfund.ch, where you can quickly run through 9 questions and find out whether your company qualifies at the moment or maybe at a later stage. Or you can also direct me or one of my colleagues, and we can have a short bilateral discussion where you stand and when the ideal timing for an application would be. This is how the process looks like. If you have done the preliminary check and handed in your application form, we usually go through the first stage of the due diligence, that is the pre-selection. Then go to the due diligence light phase and the full due diligence, very similar to what you are familiar with venture capitalists. We pitch it to our investment committee, that's the guarantee committee at the end, and then you receive a decision. And I would say in total, this whole process takes about 4 to 5 months in total. On average, but of course can be accelerated if we have all documents from you available at the moment where we need it and in the way we need it. But in general, we can be fast and we want to be fast. So happy to walk through that also in 2 months if necessary, and we've done that. But I would say the average is rather 4 to 5 months in total. The overall, the overall success rate lies at roughly 30%. So we rule out more than half of the applications in the very first stage to reduce the efforts on your side and on our side to not go into full due diligence if the chances are not given. But I think that's pretty much similar to other VC processes. We have still high fund availability, so currently 350 million Swiss francs are guaranteed and can be increased to 500 million. So yeah, there's still a lot of money to support innovative clean tech startups. From how the process looks like, maybe also a word on the phase. You might be familiar to the Schumpeterian triology, so invention, innovation, and diffusion. And yeah, and the underlying steps of these three processes. And the technology fund, the focus of the technology fund is definitely on the diffusion stage. So that's what I already mentioned earlier with the market readiness of the company, of the product. We definitely help companies in scaling up their business, but we're not targeting the invention or innovation phase. I think there you have a lot of other prominent support instruments in Switzerland, like InnoSwiss or yeah, other instruments available. Yeah, so this is where we help companies to commercialize their products. Maybe a quick look at where we stand after now roughly 7 years in operation. Today we have 110 portfolio companies that have loan guarantees in total of 190 million Swiss francs. So that means on average 1.7 million per company, an average duration of 7 years. And over the course of these last 7 years, we have accumulated CO2 savings. We've reached cumulated CO2 savings of a bit more than 4 million tons of CO2. And that's also part of the kind of assessment that we do initially when the companies apply, but also then periodically when they report their financial progress, their technical progress, and of course the environmental progress. So that's what the overall portfolio looks like. And now let me quickly introduce you to 2 of our portfolio companies. One would be Freesons from Romandie. They produce solar tiles, innovative solar tiles that are especially aesthetically pleasing and can be also applied to heritage protected buildings, which is rare. And yeah, I mean, you here in that case, you see these are all solar tiles producing renewable energy. And they have joined the portfolio early this year. And yeah, with the help of the Swiss Technology Fund, they were able to scale their business and yeah, bring more solar power in these kind of special buildings in Switzerland on the rooftops. And yeah, that is the Freesons, one example of the 110 portfolio companies. Another one would be SkyCell. They build special phase change material insulated air freight containers for pharmaceuticals. So they managed to bring down the scrap rate in pharmaceutical products that need to maintain a certain temperature window during their transportation. And also here we help them to basically scale their business to produce more of these containers and to bring pharmaceutical temperature sensitive medication to the places where it's needed and in the temperature in which it is needed. Yeah, maybe those are 2 examples from the portfolio. And with this, I also want to give you time for questions. So I think I was a bit faster than anticipated, but I hope we can now have a fruitful discussion on whether you qualify or where we can help. And happy to either exchange with you right now or also shoot me a message afterwards.
So a first for Sustainability is Better Business, David. You wrapped up before time, ahead of time, but thank you so much. I think this calls for a deeper dive into engagement with our audience and questions that you all might have. I have one to kickstart the conversation, unless there's any burning question. You can either raise your hand or jump in now, but I'll kick off with my question. In terms of the fund, I can see that we've got startups from other parts of the world here. And in terms of the fund, this is for Swiss specific startups, correct? So what might other territories learn from this as an example? Why do we not have more of this in the world, or do we, that we just don't know about? So 2 questions there, I guess.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So let me first address the first part of it. So in terms of Swiss value creation, yes, you need to be incorporated in Switzerland with your company, but that can also, you might have a Swiss partner where we can assess the individual case and see if there is a substantial value creation in Switzerland. So I would say that is subject to the individual case, whether you qualify being a foreign startup, but doing business in Switzerland, that is subject to the individual assessment, I would say. In terms of why we are not seeing more loan guarantee based instruments fostering clean tech innovation abroad, it's a good question. To be honest, I don't know about any other similar instruments, but I mean, I'm just trying to promote that this has been in operation for so long and is properly working from my impression. So yeah, I would say it's a success case in Switzerland, and yeah, we'd be happy to engage where this could be replicated. But so far, I think I'm not very familiar to other similar instruments abroad.
Okay, thank you so much for that answer. We have a few more in the chat that have crept up, David. So perhaps one from Regina, how would the application process look like for those that want to know more?
Yeah, so basically what you can do is on the one hand, of course, our homepage is very helpful. And as I said, we have a small informative video on what you need to fulfill and how the process looks like. Basically, at the beginning, there's not much needed. You would upload your investor slide deck that most of you have on the shelf anyway, I assume. You upload a recent business plan or financial plan or annual closing, whatever you have available at whatever stage you are in, and you fill out a questionnaire that we have on our side that comprises, I think, 20-something questions, and you upload these 3 documents on our homepage, and that's it. So that's basically the application, and then we get it gets interactive. So we get into contact with the companies. We try to figure out whether you fulfill these qualification criteria right away, or whether you may be better off in waiting a couple of more months to maybe display your product maturity in a better way or so. So I would say either reach out before applying to us, and we'll help you in guiding you through the process, and whenever the most suitable timing for you and your company would be, or you apply online and then we get in touch with you. So either way, we'll get an interaction.
Could I just jump in and ask a question?
Jump in, Martin.
Yes, it's Martin Bolton from Antaco AG. Do you fund pre-revenue organizations or companies?
Unfortunately not. So there's this hygienic criterion that Mitchell mentioned earlier on. So there needs to be a commercial revenue of at least 100,000 Swiss francs that the company needs to fulfill. Ideally in the business model that they want to scale their business with. So not saying any R&D or pilot efforts, but by if you are on a SaaS model, then displaying that you were able or capable of generating revenues with the SaaS model. So that's kind of part of the targeting, rather the scaling, the diffusion phase of the invention.
And if we were, I suppose, when could we start? Would we do the preliminary application before we hit the 100,000, or are you saying no, do not even talk to us before you get to the 100,000 mark? Where could we start on that radar?
I would say ideally, if you are not fulfilling the criteria yet, reach out to us and we discuss what the ideal timing would be for an application. I think that's the ideal way, yes. If not, in worst case, you would apply too early and you would receive the rejection firsthand. So that's why I think it makes sense if you think you might be a bit too premature for our instrument, then reach out to us and we clarify it and give you a green light or a yellow light for when the ideal timing is. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks for the question, Martin. And David, I'm going to jump into quite a big question, but before that, following on from Regina's, when is the deadline for the next process application?
I'm happy to tell you that there is no deadline at all, so you can all the time apply 24/7, full year round. So we're happy to receive any applications at any time. So we're not on a deadline here. We're not kind of bound to any Horizon 2020 project deadline. So yeah, shoot us a message, apply online whenever you're ready.
Good to know. Thank you. And then I'm going to ask a question from Katka Letzing, our CEO, because she knows that this is also coming from a number of different perspectives. But what is the definition of sustainability for you as an organisation, and why? I think that's quite a poignant question for today's talk.
That's a very good question, Katka. So happy to try and answer that. I mean, on the one hand, of course, since it's embedded in the CO2 Act and it's an instrument from the Swiss Federal Office for the Environment, we have to be very harsh on that. And we have a lot of sub-criteria, what environmental benefit or what environmental impact is for us. What we do in the environmental impact assessment, that is part of our assessment, we basically check out, and technically it's a consequential greenhouse gas accounting method that we apply. We try to analyze against the baseline how beneficial is your product today against the conventional technology. So if you have, I don't know, an innovative heating system that you've invented and you are commercializing, we try to see what is today's standard in the buildings and against which standards do we compare your new technology, and how much are you actually saving by installing your new heating technology compared to the conventional ones. And then we basically calculate and how much CO2 equivalents you would be saving over the course of the next 3 business years by the growth trajectory that you are projecting. And this needs to be, of course, substantial to be qualified as Cleantech or be qualified as mitigating climate change. And that's part of the process, yes. Does that answer your question, Katka?
There's a part 2 to that question too.
Did I miss out on that? Maybe you might.
So I think that Katka's answer was yes, but what is the biggest current challenge is a sort of sub to that.
The biggest current challenge, I mean, on a personal note, I'm afraid that we need to reject a couple of excellent companies or applicants that are just a bit too early for the diffusion or for our scaling up nature of the Swiss Technology Fund. So yeah, it's sometimes heartbreaking to tell the companies that we can't help them in support because they're just too early and they might have to wait another 1 or 2 years until we can support them. I think that's the biggest challenge from a personal note, that we're just targeting this diffusion phase that I mentioned. Other big challenges, I mean, despite the corona crisis induced challenges for all startups, I think it's challenging in assessing every case in a different note because every Cleantech company is active in a different market, and the greenhouse gas accounting is challenging from time to time to find an appropriate baseline, to compute what the savings would be over time. But then also we are facing, of course, the similar challenges like other VCs? Do we really rely on the numbers that we are presented? What do we think about the market? How creditworthy is the applicant? And yeah, so I think that would be rather basic operational challenges that we need to solve too. I think you're on mute, Suka.
Suki.
Suki, sorry.
All good. We have another question come in from Suzanne van der Marel. So do you see a trend in the sort of startups who apply? Are you seeing a trend?
We often receive that question, and I mean, over the last almost 7 years, we have received now 500 applications in total, and it's difficult to really boil it down to nail it down to, let's say, those are the 3 big trends. Of course, I would say Cleantech also go through the same industrial cycles and trends that you see in general. So IoT has been a huge thing in Cleantech for Cleantech ventures. We have a lot of drone companies applying in Cleantech applications. Of course, mobility is changing, and sector coupling is more important recently. But I think those are more general trends that you can see at the market, and not so specific Cleantech trends. I mean, ocean-bound plastics, solving these issues is something that has been recently taken up, and I'm also very happy that we receive applications in that space. But yeah, so I would say the general trends are mirrored in the Cleantech space, I would say.
Super, thank you. And you mentioned IoT, which is going to lead us to our next question. I'm wondering, Christian, would you like to ask your question, or I'm happy to read it on your behalf, but if you're here, feel free to ask your question directly, because I know there's another element to it.
Yes, sure. Well, actually, I think David already answered it somehow in the last question. I invented an IoT product that enables customer to work on your requirements goal, like saving energy, less CO2, measure all this. Can I apply as well with an IoT equipment like this, or has it to be directly connected to your goals, you know?
Yeah, perfect question, Christian. Thank you for that. I mean, Cleantech as such is a very general topic, right? And you basically brought it down to direct effects and indirect effects, and we definitely have a lot of companies in our portfolio that indirectly promote or indirectly display an environmental benefit. So yes, definitely you can apply with your IoT startup for support of the tech fund.
Okay.
And it sounds to me like how you roughly described it, that you are basically active in the space of reducing CO2. So yeah, I would say in general that that could be a very good fit.
Perfect. Thanks a lot.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for the question, Christian. Are there any other questions from audience members? Feel free to unmute and ask the direct question while we're still running the event. Anything further? I think we're good. We're covered. David, is there anything you'd like to spotlight while we have you? In terms of your most recent successes, or you shared some case studies already. I mean,
I'm just very happy to see that companies that we are in discussions right now are also part of your program, and so I'm happy to promote that, and also would appreciate if you know entrepreneurs, if you're an entrepreneur that falls into the broader domain of clean tech sustainability. If you think about us, it's a fantastic instrument, and it's I mean, we don't have an upside in a way. Our upside is making the world, and especially Switzerland, more sustainable. So yeah, I would appreciate if you pin your fellow entrepreneurs to the availability of these funds, because we still have a lot of funds available. And yeah, I'd be happy if you help promoting this governmental support program. And yeah, fingers crossed for all companies that have run through this year's Kickstart program.
Thank you so much, David. Are there any other questions from our Kickstart team? Because I know some of you had questions from your startups that couldn't join us right now. We're good. And Mitchell, thank you for joining. You told us a little bit about your startup at the beginning. Are your questions answered? You got one-on-one time with David earlier, so.
Yes, I think so. We've discussed, at least part of our team has discussed already with this program. So.
Super.
Good.
Well, thank you so much. Oh, Nate, super. Nate, are you dialing in from LA? Is it?
Yeah, I'm back in LA. How are you doing?
Fire away.
I had a quick question. The data that you use to define sustainability, I wondered, is that all internal? But I should disclose also, we're a data company and we're working with Kickstart on making sure the sustainability data that they incorporate really does yield to the same results. So I wondered what your process looks like. I can follow up with you after if that's easier, because I know it's a technical question, but I would be curious to see how you guys measure that and what successes you've had.
Yeah, I mean, yes, we have basically a due diligence matrix that comprises different aspects, as I mentioned earlier, like technical aspects, financial aspect, and environmental aspects. And for the environmental part, as I said, kind of the most important part is that I mean, there's a distinction between attributional and consequential greenhouse gas accounting. And what we're not doing is we're not drawing the boundaries across a certain entity and making a life cycle assessment on this particular company and what their different scopes amount up to. But what we do is basically we try to find an appropriate benchmark, so baseline technology that is in place today that you can compare the new technology to, and then basically computing how much emissions are being released with the conventional technology today and how much are being released with the new technology. And then we kind of see what the savings are. And this is what we do, and of course it's very case specific. So if we talk about feeding fishes and decrease mortality rates in fish by proper fish food, then comparing that to smart home devices, it's very different. So it's very case specific, I would say, yeah. But I'm happy to have a bilateral discussion with you if that helps you. Yeah.
That'd be great. Thanks. Yeah, I'll follow up.
Perfect. Suki, we lost you on mute.
Here we go again. How do you see the next 10, 15 or 30 years in the industry? So a looking glass question from Patricia.
Good question. I mean, hopefully in 15 years from now, kind of our job would be done. And coming back to the title of this presentation series, so ideally, sustainability is better business is incorporated in every venture in 10 to 15 years from now. That's what my hope would be. But of course, if that doesn't come along, like from the industry, from the startups, then of course I'd be happy if there are still support instruments like these around that help pushing these companies to the market and help them scaling at the market. But ideally, in 10 from 15 years from now, we're not asking us these questions, and it's kind of a state of the art that everyone is some sort of active in that space. That's my wish.
Thank you so much. I think that's answered Patricia's question. And I do believe that on that note, we can wrap up. So thank you so much for joining us and for providing us such insights, David. I think there's a lot of takeaways, and there's certainly a lot for us to take away to some of our cohort and startup pool. Yep, lots of thank yous coming into the chat. So we're going to close today's session. thank you all for joining. May I remind you that next week's session is going to be called How to Measure Your Sustainability Agenda, and it's going to be at the same time on a Thursday next week. So do join us then if you can. Once again, to our speaker, David Grosspietsch, thank you so much. And all the best. We'll be sharing the presentation of today online later. And thank you for your brilliant questions.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.